The moment Derek held up my quilt and said, "What are we supposed to do with this thing?" I knew. Not just that he was cruel. Not just that my daughter was going to let him get away with it. I knew something I'd been refusing to let myself know for almost 2 years. I kept my face perfectly still. I've had practice. There were 14 women in Cassie's living room that afternoon. Her friends, her mother-in-law Patricia, 2 cousins I hadn't seen since the wedding. They all went quiet, in that particular way people go quiet when they're watching something they're glad isn't happening to them. I sat in the chair nearest the window, holding my paper plate with a half-eaten cucumber sandwich, and I watched my daughter look at her lap. She didn't say a word. Derek turned the quilt over in his hands like it was a garage sale find. It was hand-stitched, every square, 47 individual squares of fabric I'd been collecting for 3 years. Cassie's baby blanket, her first Halloween costume, the dress she wore to her kindergarten graduation, a square from my own mother's apron. I'd worked on it every night for 8 months. My eyes had gotten worse in the process. I hadn't told anyone that part. "It's very homemade," Patricia said, and a few people laughed softly. The careful kind of laugh that pretends to be neutral. Derek set it on the gift table like it was a mildly embarrassing obligation. "We'll find a use for it," he said. I took a bite of my sandwich. Here's what I didn't say out loud. "I know what's in your garage, Derek." I'd seen it 2 months before the shower, the last time I'd stopped by their house unexpectedly. Cassie had asked me to drop off a casserole because she wasn't feeling well. Derek's car was gone. I let myself in with the key Cassie had given me years ago, the one I'd never mentioned to Derek. The garage door was cracked open. I wasn't snooping. I was just cutting through to the kitchen. But I saw the boxes, stacked neatly, labeled in Derek's handwriting. Mom's china, Olivia's books, wedding gifts, return. And one that stopped me entirely. Cash, ask R about account. I stood there for maybe 4 seconds. Then I walked inside, put the casserole in the fridge, kissed my daughter on the forehead, and went home. I didn't say anything, not then. I need you to understand something about Cassie. She was a gentle child, soft in the way that made people love her, and sometimes take advantage of her. She'd followed Derek to his city, left her teaching job, given up the apartment she'd shared with her best friend Maya. I'd watched it happen the way you watch something fall in slow motion. Arms reaching, knowing you won't make it in time. Derek wasn't a monster. That's the complicated part. He was charming and competent, and he made Cassie feel chosen. His flaw was simpler and more corrosive than cruelty. He needed to be the one who mattered most, in every room, in every relationship, especially in his marriage. I had become a problem to be managed. After the shower, I hugged Cassie at the door and told her the food was lovely. She held on a beat too long, and I felt her wanting to say something. I waited. She didn't. "Drive safe, Mom," she said. I drove home and called my friend Ruth Ann, who's been a family law paralegal for 19 years. Not to ask for legal advice, just to talk. But somewhere in that conversation, I mentioned the boxes. The one labeled cash, ask R about account. Ruth Ann went quiet. "Olivia," she said carefully, "does Cassie have a separate account from before the marriage?" She did. A small one. Her grandmother's inheritance. Not a fortune. Maybe $38,000. Money Cassie had never touched because her grandmother had said to save it for something that truly mattered. You might want to have a gentle conversation with your daughter, Ruth Ann said. Soon. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark and thought about the way Derek had held up my quilt, the performance of it. The way he'd looked at the room first, made sure he had an audience. It wasn't carelessness. It was a demonstration. This is what I think of what she brought into this marriage. This is the hierarchy here. And Cassie had looked at her lap. I started paying attention differently after that. I called Cassie every few days, kept the conversations light, listened for what she wasn't saying. I asked once, casually, whether she and Derek had talked about finances for the baby. She said Derek was handling everything. I asked if she'd checked her personal account recently. A pause. I'm sure it's fine, Mom. It wasn't fine. 3 weeks later, Cassie called me crying. Not about the money, not yet. About a fight with Derek. About feeling invisible. About how he told his mother she could stay with them for the first month after the baby came without asking Cassie first. Patricia, who had laughed at my quilt. I listened for a long time. Then I said, Cassie, I need you to log into your grandmother's account. Silence. Mom, please, just do it while we're on the phone. I heard her breathing, then the sound of typing, then nothing for a long moment. There's only $4,000, she whispered. I had already been talking to Ruth Ann for 2 weeks by then. I'd already made a copy of everything I'd seen in that garage. I'd gone back one more time when I knew Derek had a work trip with my phone camera and my reading glasses and 30 minutes of quiet. I'd already connected Cassie with a financial advisor who specialized in marital asset questions. I'd already found Maya, who had never stopped loving Cassie and had been waiting 2 years for someone to tell her it was okay to show up again. I hadn't said a word to Derek, not one word. I had smiled at him at Easter. I had sent a birthday card. I had been so warm and so present that he had entirely stopped watching me. That was the mistake he didn't know he'd made. Here's the part I haven't told you yet. The part that reframed everything for me, that turned my grief into something steadier and colder. When I went back to the garage that second time, I found something I'd missed before. Tucked behind the labeled boxes, still wrapped in its original bag, my quilt. He'd taken it from the gift table before the shower was even over, before the guests had left. He'd already decided what it was worth before I'd walked through the door that day. It had never been about the quilt. It had been about making sure I knew my place before I could establish one in that baby's life. I stood in that garage, holding the bag, and I made myself a promise. Quiet. No dramatics. Just not this. Not for my grandchild. Cassie has her own attorney now. She's been staying with me for 6 weeks. Her and her belly and her 3 bags, and the sound of her crying at night that is already, slowly, getting quieter. The financial investigation is ongoing. There's more there than the account. Ruth Ann warned me there might be. Maya came over last Tuesday. She and Cassie sat at my kitchen table for 4 hours. I made soup and stayed mostly out of the way. When I walked past at one point, Cassie was laughing. Really laughing. The laugh I remembered from before. And something in my chest unknotted itself. The quilt is on Cassie's bed. She put it there herself, the first night she arrived. She didn't say anything about it, and I didn't ask. Some things don't need to be named. Patricia called me once, after everything started. I let it go to voicemail. She left a long message about family and forgiveness, and how these things are complicated. She wasn't wrong that things are complicated, but she was wrong that I owed her a conversation. Last night, I sat in the quiet after Cassie had gone to sleep, and I thought about that baby shower, the 14 women, the careful laugh, my daughter looking at her lap. I thought about 8 months of stitching, my grandmother's apron, my worsening eyes. I didn't feel angry. I felt like a woman who knew what she was made of and had finally made sure her daughter knew it too. And somewhere in the room down the hall, my grandchild was getting ready to come into a world where her mother was already, slowly, learning to look up. That's enough. That's everything.